The morning mist clung to the ancient stones of Windsor Castle as Sergeant Marcus Thompson adjusted his crimson uniform one final time. 23 years of faithful service to the crown had taught him that appearances mattered in the royal household, but nothing had prepared him for what would unfold on this seemingly ordinary Tuesday in November. Marcus had joined the Queen's Guard straight from military academy, young and eager to serve. His father had been a palace gardener, his grandfather a stable hand. Service to the monarchy ran through his bloodline like an unbreakable thread. Over the decades, he had stood motionless for hours in all weather, protected visiting dignitaries, and maintained the dignity of his position through countless ceremonies. His record was spotless, his dedication unquestioned. The castle was bustling with unusual activity that morning. Queen Camilla had requested a private audience with several members of the household staff, something that had become more frequent since her coronation. The servants whispered among themselves about her increasingly demanding nature, though none dared speak openly about their concerns. Marcus had noticed the changes too, the way younger staff members seemed nervous around her, how longtime employees had begun requesting transfers to other royal residences. As Marcus took his position outside the Queen's private study, he could hear muffled voices from within. Lady Catherine Pemberton, the head of household staff, emerged looking pale and shaken. She had been with the royal family for over 30 years, starting as a young maid and working her way up through dedication and discretion. Marcus had never seen her look so distressed. "Everything all right, Lady Catherine?" Marcus asked quietly as she passed. She paused, glancing nervously at the closed door behind her. "The Queen is particularly demanding today, Sergeant Thompson. Young Emma has been called in." Her voice carried a weight of concern that made Marcus's stomach tighten. Emma Clark was barely 19, fresh from a small village in Yorkshire. She had started working at the palace just 3 months ago as an assistant housemaid, full of excitement about serving the royal family. Her grandmother had saved every newspaper clipping about the royals for decades, and Emma had grown up dreaming of working in the palace. She was hardworking, cheerful, and reminded Marcus of his own daughter at that age. The door to the study suddenly swung open, and Emma stumbled out, tears streaming down her face. Her usually pristine uniform was disheveled, and her hands shook as she tried to compose herself. Marcus's protective instincts, honed through years of military service and fatherhood, immediately kicked in. "Miss Clark," he said gently, stepping slightly away from his formal position. "Are you hurt?" Emma looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes, clearly struggling to maintain the composure expected of palace staff. I made a mistake with the flower arrangements, Sergeant Thompson." Her Majesty was very displeased. Before Marcus could respond, Queen Camilla's voice rang out from within the study. "Thompson, get in here immediately." Marcus straightened his shoulders and entered the elegantly appointed room. Queen Camilla stood behind an ornate desk, her expression cold and imperious. The flower arrangements Emma had mentioned sat nearby. They looked perfectly beautiful to Marcus's eyes, though he was no expert on such matters. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, offering the appropriate bow. "That girl is incompetent," Camilla declared without preamble. "I specifically requested white roses with baby's breath, and she brings me this amateur attempt. The spacing is wrong, the height is inconsistent, and don't get me started on the color coordination." Marcus glanced at the arrangements again. They seemed lovely, arranged with obvious care and attention to detail. He had seen Emma working on them earlier that morning, her face bright with concentration and pride. "I'm sure Miss Clark meant no disrespect, Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully. "She's still learning the specific preferences of the household." Camilla's eyes flashed with annoyance. "Learning? This is the royal household, Thompson, not a training school for incompetent village girls. I will not tolerate such sloppy work." She moved around the desk, her voice rising. "That girl needs to understand her place and the standards expected here. With respect, Your Majesty, Miss Clark is hard-working and eager to please. Perhaps if someone could show her. I don't want explanations, Thompson. I want action." Camilla's voice took on a sharp edge that Marcus had heard her use with other staff members. "Bring her back in here immediately. She will kneel and apologize properly for wasting my time with her inadequate work." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. In all his years of service, he had never been asked to facilitate the humiliation of a fellow staff member. The royal family had always treated their employees with basic dignity, even when correcting mistakes. "Your Majesty, I believe Miss Clark understands her error. Perhaps a simple verbal correction. Did I ask for your opinion on palace protocol, Thompson?" Camilla's voice was now openly hostile. I am giving you a direct order. Bring that girl back here, and ensure she kneels properly when she apologizes. I want her to understand that this kind of carelessness has consequences. Marcus stood perfectly still, his mind racing. Throughout his military career and his time with the Royal Guard, he had followed orders without question. The chain of command was sacred, discipline absolute. But this felt different. This felt wrong. He thought of Emma's tear-streaked face, of her grandmother who had dreamed of her granddaughter serving the crown with honor. He thought of his own daughter, working her way through university, and how he would feel if someone demanded she kneel in humiliation for an honest mistake. Your Majesty, Marcus said slowly, Miss Clark is a human being deserving of basic dignity. If there's an issue with her work, I'm sure it can be addressed through proper training and guidance. Camilla's face flushed red with anger. How dare you question my judgment? I am the queen, and you will follow my orders without debate. Bring her back here now, or you'll be looking for new employment by the end of the day. Marcus looked at the woman before him, seeing not the crown or the title, but someone who seemed to have forgotten the basic principles of human decency that the monarchy was supposed to represent. He thought of his years of service, his pension, his family's legacy of serving the crown. All of it could disappear with his next words. But then he thought of Emma, barely more than a child, being forced to kneel in humiliation for trying her best at a job she loved. I cannot in good conscience follow that order, Your Majesty, Marcus said quietly, but firmly. It goes against everything I believe the crown should represent. The silence that followed was deafening. Camilla stared at him in shock, as if no one had ever refused a direct command from her before. Outside, the normal sounds of the castle continued. Footsteps in corridors, distant voices, the tick of ancient clocks marking time that suddenly felt suspended. What did you just say to me? Camilla's voice was dangerously quiet. Marcus straightened his shoulders, feeling the weight of his decision settle around him like his heavy ceremonial coat. I said I cannot follow that order, Your Majesty. With respect, asking a young woman to kneel in humiliation for an honest mistake is beneath the dignity of this institution. You forget yourself, Thompson. I could have you arrested for insubordination. That is your prerogative, Your Majesty. But I will not be the instrument of humiliating an innocent girl who was only trying to do her job well. Camilla began pacing behind her desk, her face cycling through expressions of disbelief, anger, and something that might have been panic. It was clear she had never encountered direct defiance from a member of the household staff. Do you understand what you've just done? She demanded. You've destroyed your career, your pension, everything you've worked for. And for what? Some clumsy village girl who can't arrange flowers properly. Marcus thought of Emma's bright smile when she had first arrived at the palace, her excitement at being part of something larger than herself. He thought of all the young staff members who had come and gone in recent months, their dreams crushed by unnecessary harshness. No, Your Majesty. I've stood up for basic human dignity. That's never the wrong thing to do, regardless of the consequences. The confrontation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Lady Catherine's voice came from the other side. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but you have a scheduled call with the Prime Minister in 5 minutes. Camilla glared at Marcus, clearly frustrated that their confrontation was being interrupted. This conversation is not over, Thompson. Report to my office at 4 o'clock this afternoon. We will settle this matter then. As you wish, Your Majesty, Marcus replied, offering another formal bow before turning to leave. As he exited the study, Marcus found Lady Catherine waiting in the hallway, her expression unreadable. Emma was nowhere to be seen, presumably having returned to her duties or perhaps hidden away somewhere to compose herself. Sergeant Thompson, Lady Catherine said quietly, might I have a word? They walked in silence to a small alcove near one of the castle's many windows. Lady Catherine looked out at the grounds for a moment before speaking. I heard raised voices, she said carefully. Is everything all right? Marcus considered his words. Palace staff were expected to maintain discretion about all matters involving the royal family, but he also felt the need to prepare Lady Catherine for what might be coming. There was a disagreement about how to handle Miss Clark's situation, he said diplomatically. Lady Catherine nodded slowly. Emma is a good girl. She's been working extra hours to perfect her duties, staying late to practice arrangements, and asking questions to improve. Her mistake this morning was minor, the kind any of us might make when learning new preferences. I agree completely, Marcus said. The Queen has been challenging lately, Lady Catherine continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Several staff members have requested transfers. Others have simply left without explanation. I'm concerned about the atmosphere she's creating. Marcus nodded, understanding the delicate position Lady Catherine was in. As head of household staff, she was caught between protecting her employees and maintaining loyalty to the crown. I may not be here much longer, Marcus told her honestly. If that happens, please make sure someone looks out for the younger staff members. They shouldn't have to endure treatment that undermines their dignity. Lady Catherine's eyes widened slightly, understanding the implication. Marcus, you've served this family faithfully for over 2 decades. Surely any disagreement can be resolved. Some things are more important than career longevity, Marcus replied. I took an oath to serve the crown with honor. Sometimes honor requires difficult choices. The rest of the day passed in a strange, suspended animation. Marcus carried out his regular duties, supervising security rotations, reviewing protocols, maintaining the visible discipline that was expected of the Queen's Guard. But underneath the surface, he could feel the weight of the afternoon's confrontation and the meeting that awaited him. Word had somehow spread among the staff about the morning's events, though the details remained vague. Marcus noticed younger employees looking at him with something like admiration, while others seemed nervous about associating with someone who might be in serious trouble. Emma herself approached him during the lunch break, her eyes still showing signs of earlier tears, but her composure restored. Sergeant Thompson, she said hesitantly, I wanted to thank you for your kindness this morning. Lady Catherine told me you spoke up for me. No thanks necessary, Miss Clark. You did nothing wrong. But I did make mistakes with the arrangements. The Queen was right about the spacing being uneven. Marcus looked at this earnest young woman, so eager to take blame for what seemed like minor imperfections. Emma, perfection comes with practice and guidance, not humiliation. Don't let anyone convince you that honest mistakes make you unworthy of basic respect. She nodded, though he could see she was still processing the morning's events. My grandmother always told me the royal family represented the best of British values: honor, dignity, service to others. She would be so disappointed if she knew I had failed them. You haven't failed anyone, Marcus assured her. Sometimes the people we look up to disappoint us, but that doesn't diminish the values they're supposed to represent. Hold on to what your grandmother taught you about honor and dignity. As 4 o'clock approached, Marcus found himself standing outside Queen Camilla's study once again. This time, however, he was not alone. Lady Catherine stood nearby, along with Sir Geoffrey Hamilton, the palace's chief administrator, and Colonel James Morrison, Marcus's direct superior in the Guard. The presence of these senior staff members suggested that news of the morning's confrontation had reached higher levels within the palace hierarchy. Marcus wondered if this meeting would be a formal disciplinary hearing or something else entirely. Colonel Morrison approached him first. Marcus, I've heard there was some kind of incident this morning. Care to fill me in on the details? Marcus provided a careful but honest account of the events, focusing on the facts rather than his personal feelings about Queen Camilla's demands. Colonel Morrison listened without interruption, his expression grave. You refused a direct order from the Queen, Colonel Morrison summarized. I refused to participate in what I believed was the unnecessary humiliation of a junior staff member. Yes, sir. Sir Geoffrey stepped forward. Sergeant Thompson, you understand the seriousness of this situation. The palace operates on a strict hierarchy, and insubordination cannot be tolerated, regardless of personal feelings about specific orders. I understand the hierarchy, Sir Geoffrey. I also understand that some orders are wrong, regardless of who gives them. Lady Catherine spoke up unexpectedly. If I may, Sir Geoffrey, Miss Clark's mistake was truly minor. She's been working diligently to learn proper procedures, and her error hardly warranted severe punishment. Before anyone could respond, the study door opened, and Queen Camilla emerged. Her expression was stern, but Marcus detected something else underneath, perhaps uncertainty about how to handle a situation that had grown beyond a simple staff discipline issue. Gentlemen, Lady Catherine, she acknowledged with a nod. I trust you're here to resolve the matter of Sergeant Thompson's insubordination this morning. Colonel Morrison stepped forward. Your Majesty, we're here to ensure that any issues are handled appropriately and in accordance with both palace protocol and the standards of conduct expected of the Queen's Guard. Camilla's eyes narrowed slightly at the diplomatic language. The standards are simple, Colonel. I give orders, and they are followed. Sergeant Thompson refused to follow a direct command. Might I ask the nature of the command, Your Majesty? Sir Geoffrey inquired carefully. Camilla hesitated for a moment, perhaps realizing that describing her demand in front of senior palace officials might not reflect well on her judgment. I required a staff member to offer a proper apology for substandard work. A proper apology involving kneeling, I believe, Lady Catherine said quietly. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Marcus could see the senior staff members processing this information, their expressions carefully neutral, but their thoughts likely racing. Colonel Morrison cleared his throat. Your Majesty, while discipline and standards are certainly important, the Queen's Guard has always operated under principles of honor and dignity that extend to our treatment of all palace staff. Are you questioning my judgment as well, Colonel? Camilla's voice carried a warning tone. Not at all, Your Majesty. I'm simply noting that Sergeant Thompson's service record is exemplary, and any disciplinary action should take into account both the specific circumstances and the broader context of palace operations. Marcus watched this careful diplomatic dance with growing appreciation for his colleagues' skill in navigating difficult waters. They were defending him without directly confronting the Queen, a delicate balance that required years of experience in royal protocol. Sir Geoffrey stepped into the conversation. Perhaps we might consider this an opportunity to review our staff management procedures generally, ensuring that all palace employees understand expectations while maintaining appropriate standards of treatment. Camilla looked around the group, clearly sensing that the situation had not developed as she had expected. Her demand for Marcus's punishment had instead prompted a broader discussion about palace management practices. I expect loyalty and obedience from all staff members, she stated firmly. That includes following orders without debate or personal interpretation. Absolutely, Your Majesty, Colonel Morrison agreed. At the same time, the reputation of the royal household depends on maintaining the highest standards of conduct at all levels. Marcus realized that his colleagues were essentially protecting him while also sending a subtle message to Queen Camilla about appropriate behavior. It was a masterful display of palace diplomacy, achieved without anyone directly challenging her authority. Lady Catherine made one final contribution. If I might suggest, Your Majesty, perhaps a comprehensive review of staff training procedures would help ensure that all employees understand both expectations and proper channels for addressing concerns. The meeting concluded with no immediate resolution. Queen Camilla dismissed everyone with instructions to consider the matter carefully and report back with recommendations. Marcus understood that he was essentially in limbo, not punished, but not exactly cleared either. As the group dispersed, Colonel Morrison walked alongside Marcus. You've put yourself in a difficult position, he said quietly. But I want you to know that your commitment to principle hasn't gone unnoticed. That evening, Marcus sat in his small apartment on the castle grounds, reflecting on the day's events. 23 years of service had come down to a single moment of moral choice. He thought about Emma, about all the young staff members who looked to senior employees for guidance on how to navigate the complex world of royal service. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The caller was his daughter Sarah, now in her final year at Cambridge. Dad, you sound tired, she said after they had exchanged greetings. It's been a challenging day at work, Marcus admitted. Want to talk about it? Marcus considered how much he could share without violating his obligations of discretion. Sometimes you face situations where doing the right thing might cost you everything you've worked for. But you have to do it anyway, because the alternative is becoming someone you can't respect. Sarah was quiet for a moment. That sounds like something Grandpa would have said. Marcus smiled, thinking of his father who had spent decades tending the palace gardens with quiet dignity. He taught me that service means more than just following orders. It means upholding the values that make service worthwhile. I'm proud of you, Dad. Whatever happened today, I know you did the right thing. After ending the call, Marcus walked to his window and looked out at the castle grounds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and he still didn't know how his confrontation with Queen Camilla would ultimately be resolved. But, for the first time all day, he felt a sense of peace with his decision. The ancient stones of Windsor Castle had witnessed centuries of human drama, moments of courage and cowardice, honor and betrayal, principle and compromise. As Marcus prepared for whatever would come next, he took comfort in knowing that when his moment of testing had arrived, he had chosen to stand with dignity rather than kneel in complicity. The consequences of that choice would soon unfold in ways none of them could have predicted. The next morning brought an unusual tension to Windsor Castle that even the youngest scullery maids could sense. Word of the confrontation between Sergeant Thompson and Queen Camilla had spread through the servant quarters like wildfire, though details remained frustratingly vague. Staff members exchanged worried glances and whispered conversations that died abruptly when supervisors appeared. Marcus arrived at his post early, as was his custom, but found the atmosphere markedly different from previous days. Fellow guards nodded respectfully, some offering subtle expressions of support, while others maintained careful distance. The hierarchy of palace life created a complex web of loyalties and self-preservation that Marcus understood all too well. Emma Clark had arrived even earlier than usual, determined to perfect every aspect of her duties. Marcus observed her working with methodical precision, checking and rechecking each flower arrangement, each polished surface, each carefully folded linen. The joy that had initially characterized her work had been replaced by anxious perfectionism. "Miss Clark," Marcus said quietly as she passed his station. "Might I have a word?" She approached nervously, still clearly shaken by the previous day's events. "Yes, Sergeant Thompson. How are you managing after yesterday?" Emma glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard. "I've been practicing the arrangements all morning. I stayed late last night going through the preference guides Lady Catherine gave me. I won't make the same mistakes again." Marcus felt a pang of sadness at the change in this young woman's demeanor. "Emma, perfectionism born from fear isn't healthy. Good work comes from confidence and training, not from terror of making mistakes." "But I did make mistakes," she insisted. The Queen was right to be displeased. The Queen was wrong to handle her displeasure the way she did, Marcus said firmly, but quietly. "Minor mistakes don't justify humiliation. Remember that, regardless of what anyone else tells you." Before Emma could respond, Lady Catherine appeared around the corner, her expression grave. "Sergeant Thompson, Sir Geoffrey would like to see you in his office immediately." Marcus's stomach tightened. A summons from the chief administrator so early in the morning suggested developments in his situation. He followed Lady Catherine through the labyrinth of palace corridors, noting how other staff members either avoided eye contact or offered small nods of encouragement. Sir Geoffrey's office occupied a corner of the administrative wing, its walls lined with portraits of previous palace administrators dating back centuries. The man himself sat behind an imposing desk covered with documents, his usually composed expression showing signs of strain. "Sergeant Thompson, please sit," Sir Geoffrey began without preamble. "I've spent considerable time since yesterday evening reviewing your situation and consulting with relevant parties about how to proceed." Marcus sat carefully, maintaining the straight posture that had become second nature after decades of military service. "I understand, Sir Geoffrey. Your refusal to follow Queen Camilla's direct order has created a significant precedent issue," Sir Geoffrey continued. "If word of this incident spreads beyond the palace walls, it could undermine public confidence in the royal household's internal discipline." "I understand the implications," Marcus replied. "However, I cannot regret standing against what I believed was wrong." Sir Geoffrey studied him for a long moment. "Your service record is exemplary. 23 years without a single disciplinary action, commendations for dedication and professionalism, respect from colleagues at every level. Which makes this situation particularly challenging." Marcus remained silent, sensing that Sir Geoffrey had more to say. "I've also reviewed Miss Clark's employment file," Sir Geoffrey continued. "Her work has been consistently satisfactory, and yesterday's flower arrangement issue appears to have been quite minor. Lady Catherine confirms that the girl has been working diligently to master palace standards. She's a good worker who deserves fair treatment," Marcus said. "Indeed." Sir Geoffrey picked up a document from his desk. "This presents us with a delicate situation. On one hand, we cannot simply ignore insubordination to the Queen. On the other hand, the circumstances surrounding that insubordination raise questions about appropriate management practices." Marcus felt a glimmer of hope, but remained cautious. Palace politics were notoriously complex, and apparent support could evaporate quickly when royal displeasure was involved. "I've spoken with Colonel Morrison about your case," Sir Geoffrey said. "He speaks very highly of your character and suggests that this incident, while serious, should be viewed in the context of your overall service record and the specific circumstances involved." "I appreciate the Colonel's support." Sir Geoffrey leaned forward slightly. "I've also had preliminary discussions with other senior staff members about recent patterns in staff management. Your incident yesterday was not isolated. We've had an unusual number of resignation requests and transfer applications in recent months." This revelation surprised Marcus. He had noticed increased tension among staff, but hadn't realized the scope of the problem. "Are you suggesting systemic issues?" Marcus asked carefully. "I'm suggesting that effective palace management requires balance between maintaining standards and treating staff with appropriate respect," Sir Geoffrey replied diplomatically. Yesterday's incident has highlighted the importance of that balance. A soft knock interrupted their conversation. Lady Catherine entered with a tea service, her timing clearly intentional rather than coincidental. "Forgive the interruption," she said, "but I thought you might appreciate some refreshment." As she poured tea, Lady Catherine spoke quietly. "Sir Geoffrey, I feel I should mention that several staff members have approached me this morning expressing concern about recent management practices. The younger employees, in particular, seem quite unsettled." Sir Geoffrey nodded grimly. "How many resignation requests have you received this month, Lady Catherine?" "7 formal requests, sir, and 3 employees who simply failed to return after their last shifts without providing notice." Marcus was shocked by these numbers. Staff turnover at the palace had traditionally been extremely low, with many employees spending entire careers in royal service. "That's an unprecedented departure rate," Sir Geoffrey observed. "Have the departing staff provided reasons for leaving?" Lady Catherine hesitated. "Most cite seeking new opportunities, but informal conversations suggest they felt unwelcome in their positions." The implication hung heavy in the air. Marcus realized that his confrontation with Queen Camilla had occurred within a broader context of staff management problems. Sir Geoffrey set down his teacup with deliberate precision. "Lady Catherine, I want you to prepare a confidential report on staff satisfaction and recent turnover patterns. Include any relevant feedback from departing employees, but ensure all information is presented anonymously." "Of course, Sir Geoffrey." After Lady Catherine left, Sir Geoffrey turned his attention back to Marcus. "Your situation has become more complex than a simple disciplinary matter. We're dealing with broader questions about palace management culture." "I was only thinking about protecting a young woman from unnecessary humiliation," Marcus said. "I didn't intend to create broader complications." "Sometimes individual acts of principle illuminate larger systemic issues," Sir Geoffrey replied. "The question now becomes how to address those issues while maintaining the dignity and authority of the royal household." Before Marcus could respond, Sir Geoffrey's phone rang. The caller identification showed it was an internal palace extension. Sir Geoffrey answered formally. "Sir Geoffrey Hamilton." "Yes, Your Majesty." "I understand. This afternoon at 3 o'clock." "Of course, Your Majesty." Marcus's heart sank as Sir Geoffrey ended the call. Queen Camilla's direct involvement suggested the situation was escalating rather than resolving. "The Queen wishes to meet with both of us this afternoon," Sir Geoffrey announced. "She's prepared what she calls a final resolution to yesterday's incident." The hours between the morning meeting and the afternoon appointment passed slowly. Marcus carried out his regular duties with mechanical precision while his mind raced through possible scenarios. The phrase, final resolution, carried ominous implications. During his lunch break, Marcus encountered Emma in one of the palace's service corridors. She looked exhausted despite the early hour, her usual bright energy replaced by nervous anxiety. "Emma, are you feeling all right?" Marcus asked with concern. She looked around nervously before answering. "I've been trying so hard to get everything perfect, Sergeant Thompson. But I keep worrying that I'll make another mistake and cause more trouble." "You haven't caused any trouble," Marcus assured her. "Whatever difficulties arose yesterday, they weren't your fault. But if I hadn't made mistakes with the arrangements, none of this would have happened. You wouldn't be in trouble because of me." Marcus stopped walking and faced her directly. "Listen to me carefully, Emma. You are not responsible for other people's inappropriate reactions to minor mistakes. Your error was insignificant. The problem lies with how it was handled, not with you." Tears began forming in her eyes. "My grandmother was so proud when I got this position. She told everyone in our village that her granddaughter was working for the Queen. If I get dismissed..." "You're not going to be dismissed," Marcus said firmly. "You're a good worker who made a tiny mistake while learning a new job. That doesn't justify losing your position." "But what about you? Lady Catherine says you might be in serious trouble." Marcus considered his response carefully. "Sometimes adults have to make difficult choices about what's right and wrong. I made my choice, and I accept whatever consequences follow. That doesn't seem fair." "Fairness and doing the right thing don't always coincide," Marcus replied. "But we can only control our own actions and choices." As the afternoon appointment approached, Marcus found himself reflecting on his decades of service to the crown. He had always believed that royal service represented the highest ideals of duty, honor, and public service. The institution was supposed to embody the best of British values and provide moral leadership for the nation. Yesterday's confrontation had challenged those beliefs in fundamental ways. How could he reconcile his lifelong devotion to the monarchy with witnessing behavior that contradicted everything he thought it represented? At precisely 3 o'clock, Marcus stood outside Queen Camilla's study alongside Sir Geoffrey. Both men wore their formal uniforms and maintained the composed expressions required for royal audiences. But Marcus could sense his colleague's tension. Queen Camilla received them in her private study, now rearranged with additional seating that suggested this meeting would be more formal than their previous confrontation. Her expression was stern but controlled, lacking the open anger of the previous day. "Gentlemen," she began without preamble, "yesterday's incident has required considerable thought and consultation. Insubordination cannot be tolerated within the royal household, regardless of individual circumstances or personal feelings." Marcus maintained his composure while bracing for dismissal. "However," she continued, "I have also reflected on the broader implications of staff management practices and the importance of maintaining both discipline and morale within the palace." Sir Geoffrey spoke carefully. "Your Majesty, we appreciate your thoughtful consideration of these complex issues. I have decided," Queen Camilla announced, "that Sergeant Thompson will receive a formal reprimand for refusing to follow a direct order. This reprimand will remain in his personnel file as a record of the incident." Marcus felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. A formal reprimand was serious, but not career-ending. "Additionally," she continued, "all palace staff will undergo mandatory training on proper protocols for handling workplace concerns and conflicts. This training will emphasize both the importance of following proper channels and the appropriate methods for addressing staff performance issues." Sir Geoffrey nodded approvingly. "That seems like a constructive approach to preventing future misunderstandings." "Furthermore," Queen Camilla said, her tone becoming slightly sharper, "I want it clearly understood that any future instances of insubordination will result in immediate dismissal, regardless of service records or personal circumstances." "Understood completely, Your Majesty," Marcus replied. Queen Camilla studied him for a moment. "Do you have anything to add to this resolution, Sergeant Thompson?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "I accept the reprimand, Your Majesty. I hope the training program will help all staff members understand how to maintain both high standards and appropriate treatment of personnel." "See that it does," she replied curtly. "You're dismissed." As they left the study, Marcus felt emotionally drained despite the relatively positive outcome. The formal reprimand would affect his record, but he retained his position and pension eligibility. Sir Geoffrey walked beside him silently until they reached a private corridor. "You handled that well," he said quietly. The Queen was under considerable pressure to take stronger action. "What kind of pressure?" Marcus asked. "Let's just say that certain advisors felt your example might encourage others to question royal authority. The training program was a compromise that allows everyone to save face while addressing underlying issues." Marcus understood the diplomatic implications. His act of defiance had forced a broader examination of palace management practices, but the resolution allowed Queen Camilla to maintain her authority while implementing changes. "What about Emma?" Marcus asked. "Has her situation been resolved?" "Miss Clark will participate in the general training program, but there are no plans for specific disciplinary action regarding yesterday's incident." That evening, Marcus encountered Emma as they both finished their shifts. She looked considerably more relaxed than she had that morning. "Sergeant Thompson," she said with a tentative smile, "I heard that everything worked out all right." "It seems so," Marcus replied. "How are you feeling about continuing your work here?" "Better than I felt this morning," she admitted. "Lady Catherine spoke with me this afternoon about the training program. She said it would help all of us understand proper procedures better." "That sounds beneficial." Emma hesitated before continuing. "I wanted to thank you again for standing up for me yesterday. I know it could have cost you everything." "You don't need to thank me for doing what was right," Marcus said. "Just remember that you deserve to be treated with dignity, regardless of your position in the hierarchy." "I will," she promised. "And, Sergeant Thompson, my grandmother always said the measure of a person isn't their position or title, but how they treat those who can't help them in return." Marcus smiled at the wisdom of a village grandmother who had probably never set foot in a palace but understood human decency better than some who lived surrounded by royal splendor. As he returned to his quarters that night, Marcus reflected on the day's resolution. The outcome hadn't been perfect. He carried a formal reprimand, and underlying tensions remained unresolved. But Emma was safe, staff training would address systemic problems, and he had maintained his integrity. More importantly, The incident had sparked conversations about palace management practices that might prevent future young staff members from facing similar situations. Sometimes, Marcus realized, individual acts of principle could create ripple effects that extended far beyond their immediate circumstances. The ancient stones of Windsor Castle had witnessed another small chapter in the ongoing story of human dignity versus institutional power. This time, dignity had achieved a qualified victory, though the larger struggle continued. 3 weeks after the confrontation that had shaken Windsor Castle's foundations, the mandatory staff training program began in earnest. The palace's Grand Assembly Hall, normally reserved for state functions and ceremonial events, had been transformed into an educational space with rows of chairs facing a presentation area. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that discussions about workplace dignity were taking place in a room that had hosted coronations and state banquets. The training sessions were led by Dr. Margaret Whitfield, a workplace psychology expert from Cambridge University who specialized in organizational culture and employee relations. Her appointment had raised eyebrows among some traditional palace staff who viewed outside consultants with suspicion, but Sir Geoffrey had insisted on bringing in an objective professional rather than relying on internal personnel. Marcus found himself sitting in the third row, surrounded by colleagues from across the palace hierarchy. To his left sat James Patterson, a veteran footman with nearly as many years of service as Marcus himself. To his right, young Emma Clark took careful notes on every point Dr. Whitfield made, her determination to excel now channeled into understanding proper workplace dynamics. Effective management in any organization requires balancing authority with respect for human dignity. Dr. Whitfield began, her clear voice carrying easily through the ornate hall. This principle applies whether you're managing a corner shop or a royal palace. The first session focused on communication skills and conflict resolution. Marcus watched as staff members who had never spoken directly to each other participated in role-playing exercises designed to illustrate proper approaches to addressing workplace concerns. During a break, Lady Catherine approached Marcus. "How are you finding the training, Sergeant?" "Educational," Marcus replied diplomatically. Dr. Whitfield seems to understand the unique challenges of our environment while emphasizing universal principles of respect. "Several younger staff members have mentioned how much they're learning," Lady Catherine said. Emma Clark, in particular, seems to be gaining confidence. Marcus glanced across the room where Emma was engaged in animated discussion with other housemaids about proper channels for reporting concerns. The transformation from the tearful, anxious girl he had encountered weeks earlier was remarkable. "She's resilient," Marcus observed. "The incident shook her, but she's using it as a learning experience rather than letting it defeat her." "Not everyone has been so fortunate," Lady Catherine said quietly. "I've received 2 more resignation requests since the training began. Some staff members feel the changes are too little, too late." This news troubled Marcus. While the training program addressed future situations, it couldn't undo the damage already done to staff morale and confidence. The second week of training introduced more advanced concepts about institutional culture and leadership responsibility. Dr. Whitfield presented case studies from other high-profile organizations that had successfully transformed toxic workplace environments. "Cultural change requires consistent commitment from leadership at every level," she explained during one session. "It's not enough to implement policies if daily behaviors don't reflect those principles." Marcus noticed that Queen Camilla had not attended any of the training sessions, despite Dr. Whitfield's gentle suggestions that leadership participation would demonstrate commitment to the program's goals. Her absence sent its own message to staff members who were carefully monitoring whether the changes were genuine or merely cosmetic. During the third week, an unexpected development altered the trajectory of the entire program. Marcus was summoned to Colonel Morrison's office early on a Tuesday morning, finding his superior in conversation with Sir Geoffrey and a man he didn't immediately recognize. "Marcus, please join us," Colonel Morrison said. "I'd like you to meet Lord Harrison Pembroke, the Queen's private secretary." Marcus recognized the name immediately. Lord Pembroke was one of the most senior officials in the royal household, responsible for coordinating the Queen's official duties and serving as a primary advisor on matters of protocol and public relations. "Sergeant Thompson," Lord Pembroke said, extending his hand. "I've heard considerable discussion about your recent, principled stand. I wanted to speak with you directly about the broader implications." Marcus shook hands cautiously. "My lord, please sit." Lord Pembroke gestured to a chair across from Colonel Morrison's desk. "I've been reviewing reports about staff turnover patterns and workplace climate issues throughout the royal household. Your incident with Queen Camilla appears to have been a catalyst that brought these issues into focus. Sir Geoffrey leaned forward. Lord Pembroke has been conducting a comprehensive review of management practices across all royal residences. What we've discovered, Lord Pembroke continued, is concerning. Staff turnover has increased significantly over the past year, not just at Windsor, but at other properties as well. Exit interviews reveal patterns of complaint about management style and workplace atmosphere. Marcus wondered where this conversation was heading. I wasn't aware the problems were so widespread. Neither were we, initially, Lord Pembroke admitted. Your refusal to follow Queen Camilla's order prompted us to investigate whether similar incidents had occurred elsewhere. What we found suggests systemic issues that extend beyond any single incident. Colonel Morrison spoke up. Marcus, Lord Pembroke has a proposition for you. Lord Pembroke nodded. We're establishing a new position, Staff Welfare Advocate, within the Royal Household Administration. This person would be responsible for ensuring that all employees are treated appropriately and that proper channels exist for addressing workplace concerns. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. That sounds like an important role. Indeed. The position would report directly to the private secretary's office, providing independence from immediate supervisors and protection for employees who need to raise sensitive issues. Sir Geoffrey added, the advocate would also be responsible for ongoing training programs and cultural development initiatives throughout the royal household. Marcus began to understand the implications. You're asking me to consider this position? Your actions 3 weeks ago demonstrated precisely the kind of principled leadership we need, Lord Pembroke said. Someone who will prioritize employee welfare, even when faced with significant personal risk. The offer was unexpected and flattering, but Marcus needed to understand the full scope before responding. What would this mean for my current position with the Queen's Guard? Colonel Morrison answered. You would be promoted to Chief Inspector level, with corresponding salary and benefits. The role would require occasional travel between royal residences, but would be based primarily here at Windsor. There's another aspect to consider, Lord Pembroke said. This position would occasionally require challenging decisions and potentially difficult conversations with senior royal family members. We need someone who has already proven their willingness to prioritize principle over convenience. Marcus thought about Emma Clark and the other young staff members who had looked to him for protection and guidance. The opportunity to formalize that protective role was appealing, but he also recognized the potential challenges. How would Queen Camilla respond to my appointment to such a position? Marcus asked directly. Lord Pembroke's expression became carefully neutral. The Queen Consort has been informed that changes are necessary to address staff welfare issues. She understands that these changes have royal approval at the highest levels. The implication was clear. This initiative had backing from King Charles himself, making it effectively non-negotiable regardless of Queen Camilla's personal feelings. I'd like some time to consider this opportunity, Marcus said. It represents a significant career change. Of course, Lord Pembroke replied. Take a week to think it over. In the meantime, I'd like you to continue observing the training program and provide feedback on its effectiveness. After the meeting ended, Marcus walked through the palace corridors with his mind spinning. The offer represented vindication for his principled stand, but it also meant accepting significant new responsibilities and potential ongoing conflicts. That afternoon, during another training session, Marcus found himself observing his colleagues with new eyes. If he accepted the staff welfare advocate position, these would be the people he'd be responsible for protecting and supporting. Dr. Whitfield was leading a discussion about organizational accountability when Emma Clark raised her hand. Dr. Whitfield, what happens when someone in a position of authority doesn't follow the principles we're learning about? The question created visible tension in the room. Several staff members glanced nervously at Marcus, knowing the personal cost he had paid for addressing exactly that issue. That's an excellent question, Dr. Whitfield replied. Accountability must exist at every level of an organization. If leadership doesn't model the behavior they expect from others, policies and training become meaningless. James Patterson, the veteran footman, spoke up unexpectedly. But what if challenging inappropriate behavior puts your job at risk? Some of us can't afford to lose our positions. Marcus felt the weight of dozens of eyes on him. His colleagues knew he had faced exactly that choice and were looking to him for guidance. Sometimes, Marcus said carefully, you have to decide what kind of person you want to be when the test comes. The cost of compromising your principles might be higher than the cost of standing up for them. Dr. Whitfield nodded approvingly. Moral courage often requires personal risk. But organizations that punish ethical behavior are fundamentally broken and will eventually face larger consequences. After the session, Emma approached Marcus privately. Sergeant Thompson, I wanted you to know that watching you stand up for me changed how I think about work and dignity. I've been encouraging other new staff members to speak up when they're treated inappropriately. I'm glad to hear that, Emma. Everyone deserves to work in an environment that respects their basic humanity. Lady Catherine told me there might be changes coming to make things better for all of us. Is that true? Marcus considered how much he could reveal about the staff welfare advocate position. Changes are definitely being considered. The goal is to ensure that what happened to you never happens to anyone else. That evening, Marcus called his daughter Sarah to discuss the job offer. He explained the situation carefully, focusing on the opportunity to formalize his protective role while acknowledging the potential challenges. Dad, this sounds like exactly the kind of work you're meant to do, Sarah said enthusiastically. You've always believed in standing up for people who can't protect themselves. The position would come with significant responsibilities and potential conflicts, Marcus cautioned. I'd be essentially serving as a check on royal authority when it comes to staff treatment. Isn't that what you did anyway, just without official authority to back you up? Marcus realized she was right. His confrontation with Queen Camilla had been an informal version of what the staff welfare advocate position would formalize. Your grandfather always said the royal family should represent the best of British values, Sarah continued. This position would help ensure they actually live up to that standard. The next morning brought unexpected news that would influence Marcus's decision. Lady Catherine approached him with obvious distress, carrying a formal-looking document. Sergeant Thompson, I've just received another resignation letter. This one is particularly troubling. She handed him the letter, which was from Mrs. Helen Morrison, a housekeeper who had worked at the palace for 15 years. Her resignation was effective immediately, and her reasons were stated bluntly. I can no longer work in an environment where staff members are treated as disposable and where basic dignity is not guaranteed. Recent events have made it clear that some members of the royal household view employees as servants to be humiliated rather than human beings deserving respect. The letter's directness was shocking. Palace staff traditionally maintained diplomatic language even when departing, but Mrs. Morrison had abandoned such niceties in favor of honest criticism. She's not the only one, Lady Catherine said quietly. I've had informal conversations with several other long-term employees who are considering leaving. They're watching to see whether the training program represents real change or just window dressing. Marcus realized that his decision about the staff welfare advocate position had implications beyond his own career. Staff members were looking for evidence that the institution was serious about cultural change. Has Mrs. Morrison's letter been shared with senior administration? Marcus asked. Sir Geoffrey has a copy. I believe Lord Pembroke will see it as well. That afternoon, Marcus requested a meeting with Lord Pembroke to discuss the job offer further. They met in the private secretary's elegant office, with its walls lined with portraits of previous royal advisors dating back centuries. I've reviewed the scope and responsibilities of the staff welfare advocate position, Marcus began. I'm prepared to accept the role, but I have some conditions. Lord Pembroke raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. First, the position must have genuine authority to investigate complaints and recommend disciplinary action when appropriate, regardless of the seniority of the person involved. Agreed. The role would be meaningless without real enforcement power. Second, I want regular reporting requirements to ensure that patterns of concern are identified and addressed promptly, not allowed to fester until they reach crisis levels. That seems prudent. Marcus took a deep breath before stating his most important condition. Third, I need assurance that this position has backing from the very top of the royal hierarchy. If I'm going to challenge inappropriate behavior by senior royal family members, I need to know I won't be hung out to dry when political pressure mounts. Lord Pembroke was quiet for a long moment. Sergeant Thompson, this initiative has direct approval from His Majesty the King. He is personally committed to ensuring that the royal household represents the highest standards of conduct toward all employees. The weight of royal backing gave Marcus confidence that the position would have real authority rather than being merely cosmetic. In that case, I accept the position, Marcus said formally. Lord Pembroke smiled. Excellent. We'll announce your appointment next week, after the current training program concludes. Dr. Whitfield has recommended that you work with her to develop ongoing professional development initiatives. As Marcus left the meeting, he felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The new role represented an opportunity to institutionalize the protection of staff members who found themselves in situations similar to Emma's. It also meant he would likely face ongoing challenges from those who preferred the old system of unquestioned authority. That evening, Marcus sought out Emma to share the news of his new appointment. He found her in the staff dining area, reviewing notes from the day's training session. "Emma, I have some news that might interest you." She looked up with curiosity. "What kind of news, Sergeant Thompson?" "I've been offered a new position within the palace administration. Staff welfare advocate. My job will be to ensure that all employees are treated appropriately and to provide support when workplace problems arise." Emma's face lit up with genuine happiness. "That's wonderful. You'll be able to help people who face situations like mine. That's the goal. I wanted you to know because your situation was part of what led to this position being created. Does this mean things will really change around here?" Marcus considered his response carefully. "It means we're taking concrete steps to ensure change happens. But lasting cultural transformation requires time and consistent effort from everyone." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "My grandmother always said that real change happens one person at a time, one situation at a time." Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. As Marcus prepared for his transition to the new role, he reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought him to this point. A single moment of moral courage had escalated into a comprehensive examination of palace culture and ultimately resulted in institutional reform. The ancient stones of Windsor Castle were witnessing the beginning of a new chapter in royal household management, one that prioritized human dignity alongside traditional hierarchy. Whether these changes would prove lasting remained to be seen, but Marcus was determined to use his new authority to ensure that future Emma Clarks would never face the humiliation that had sparked this entire transformation. The announcement of Marcus Thompson's appointment as staff welfare advocate sent shockwaves through the royal household that reached far beyond Windsor Castle's walls. The official statement, released through the private secretary's office, was diplomatically worded but carried unmistakable implications about the monarchy's commitment to workplace reform. Marcus's first day in his new role began at 6 in the morning with a comprehensive briefing from Sir Geoffrey and Dr. Whitfield. His office, located in the administrative wing near the private secretary's suite, had been specially furnished with filing cabinets for confidential records, a secure telephone line, and comfortable seating designed to encourage honest conversations. "Your primary responsibility," Sir Geoffrey explained, "is serving as an independent advocate for any staff member who feels they've been treated inappropriately. You'll investigate complaints, recommend corrective actions, and work with management to prevent future incidents." Dr. Whitfield added, "We've established strict confidentiality protocols. Staff members must feel safe approaching you without fear of retaliation. Any breach of that trust would undermine the entire program." Marcus reviewed the procedures they had developed for handling different types of complaints. Minor issues would be addressed through mediation and training. Serious misconduct would trigger formal investigations with potential disciplinary consequences. The most severe cases could result in dismissal recommendations, regardless of the perpetrator's position within the royal hierarchy. "What happens if my investigation concludes that a senior royal family member has behaved inappropriately?" Marcus asked directly. Sir Geoffrey's expression became serious. "You would prepare a confidential report for Lord Pembroke, and ultimately for His Majesty the King. The royal family is not above the standards we're establishing for everyone else." By 10 o'clock that morning, Marcus had received his first official complaint. Sarah Matthews, a young cleaner who worked in the staterooms, knocked nervously on his office door. "Chief Inspector Thompson, I was told I could speak with you about a problem I've been having." Marcus gestured for her to sit in one of the comfortable chairs positioned away from his formal desk. "Please, call me Marcus. Tell me what's been troubling you." Sarah's story was frustratingly familiar. A senior butler named Harold Cunningham had been consistently dismissive and demanding toward younger female staff members. He regularly assigned them extra duties as punishment for minor imperfections, made inappropriate comments about their appearance, and created an atmosphere of anxiety and fear in his department. "I tried speaking with his supervisor," Sarah explained, "but Mr. Cunningham has been here for 20 years and is well connected. I was told to develop a thicker skin, and that palace work requires resilience." Marcus took careful notes while Sarah spoke, recognizing patterns that suggested this was not an isolated personality conflict, but a systematic abuse of authority. "Has Mr. Cunningham's behavior affected other staff members?" Marcus asked. 3 girls in our department have requested transfers in the past 6 months. 2 others are actively looking for jobs elsewhere. We're all afraid to complain directly because he has the power to make our lives miserable. After Sarah left, Marcus began his first formal investigation. He interviewed other staff members who worked in Cunningham's department, reviewed personnel records, and examined patterns of transfer requests and resignations. The evidence painted a clear picture of a supervisor who used his authority to intimidate and demean subordinates, particularly young women who lacked the seniority or connections to resist his behavior effectively. Marcus scheduled a meeting with Cunningham for the following morning. The man arrived at Marcus's office with visible irritation at being summoned for questioning. "I don't understand why Palace administration is suddenly micromanaging department operations," Cunningham declared before Marcus could speak. "I've been maintaining discipline and standards in my area for 2 decades without complaints." Marcus remained calm, but direct. "Mr. Cunningham, I've received multiple reports about inappropriate treatment of staff members under your supervision. I'd like to hear your perspective on these concerns." Inappropriate treatment. Cunningham's voice rose slightly. "These young people today don't understand what real work means. They expect constant praise and accommodation instead of learning proper discipline. Can you give me specific examples of the discipline issues you're addressing?" Cunningham launched into complaints about minor mistakes and perceived attitude problems that clearly reflected unrealistic expectations rather than legitimate performance concerns. His description of corrective measures revealed a pattern of petty harassment disguised as management. "Mr. Cunningham," Marcus interrupted, "requiring staff members to re-clean already spotless rooms because they didn't bow sufficiently when you entered is not reasonable workplace discipline. I maintain proper respect for hierarchy and authority," Cunningham replied defensively, something that seems to have fallen out of fashion recently. Marcus understood that Cunningham's resistance represented the broader challenge of changing entrenched attitudes within the palace culture. "Palace hierarchy requires respect flowing in both directions," Marcus said firmly. "Authority comes with responsibility to treat subordinates with basic human dignity." The meeting concluded with Marcus informing Cunningham that he would be required to attend additional management training and that his interactions with staff would be monitored closely. Future complaints would result in formal disciplinary action. That afternoon, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Queen Camilla appeared at his office door without advance notice, her expression stern and unwelcoming. "Chief Inspector Thompson," she said, emphasizing his new title with obvious skepticism. "I understand you've been busy questioning longtime palace staff about their management methods." Marcus stood respectfully. "Your Majesty, I'm investigating legitimate workplace concerns as part of my appointed duties. Harold Cunningham has served this household faithfully for 20 years, she continued. His methods may seem strict to modern sensibilities, but they maintain the standards that have made this institution respected worldwide. With respect, Your Majesty, intimidating and demeaning staff members doesn't maintain institutional standards. It undermines them by creating an atmosphere of fear rather than pride in service." Camilla's eyes flashed with anger that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of their previous confrontation. "You seem to have forgotten that this is a royal household, not a modern corporation. Traditional methods of maintaining discipline have served us well for centuries." "Traditional methods that respect human dignity, yes," Marcus replied carefully. "But tradition should enhance our values, not excuse behavior that contradicts them." "I find your interpretation of palace traditions presumptuous," Camilla said coldly. "You would do well to remember that your new position exists at royal discretion and can be eliminated just as easily as it was created." The threat was clear, but Marcus had prepared for this moment. "Your Majesty, my appointment carries direct authorization from His Majesty the King and operates under the supervision of the Private Secretary's office. I understand my responsibilities and intend to fulfill them regardless of personal consequences." Camilla stared at him for a long moment, clearly frustrated by his refusal to be intimidated. "We shall see how long your idealistic principles survive contact with palace reality, Chief Inspector." After she left, Marcus sat quietly for several minutes, processing the encounter. Queen Camilla's hostility confirmed that his new role would face significant resistance from those who preferred the old system of unquestioned authority. The next morning brought more complex challenges. Marcus received a complaint from Peter Ashworth, a footman who alleged that Lord Pembroke himself had made inappropriate demands during a recent event. According to Ashworth, Lord Pembroke had required him to work a 16-hour shift without breaks, and then criticized him publicly for appearing tired during the final hours. This complaint put Marcus in an extremely difficult position. Lord Pembroke was his ultimate supervisor and the person who had championed his appointment. Investigating his own superior required careful navigation of palace politics and personal relationships. Marcus scheduled a private meeting with Lord Pembroke to discuss the allegation. He approached the conversation with diplomatic care while maintaining his commitment to thorough investigation. Lord Pembroke, I've received a workplace concern that involves your management of staff during last week's state dinner. I wanted to discuss this with you directly before proceeding. Lord Pembroke listened to the details without defensiveness, then sighed heavily. Peter is correct. I did require him to work an excessive shift, and I was unfairly critical when he showed signs of fatigue. The event was particularly stressful, but that doesn't excuse inappropriate treatment of staff. Marcus was pleasantly surprised by Lord Pembroke's immediate acknowledgement of the problem. How would you like to address Mr. Ashworth's concerns? I'll apologize to Peter personally and ensure he receives compensatory time off. I'll also review our event staffing procedures to prevent similar situations in the future. That seems appropriate. Marcus agreed. I'll document the complaint and resolution for my records. Lord Pembroke studied Marcus for a moment. This was a test, wasn't it? To see whether I would investigate complaints against my own supervisors. Every complaint receives equal attention, regardless of who's involved, Marcus replied. That's essential for maintaining credibility with staff. Good. That's exactly the independence we need in this position. As his second week progressed, Marcus established regular office hours when staff members could approach him with concerns. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Employees who had suffered in silence for months or years finally had a safe venue for expressing their frustrations and seeking redress. Emma Clark visited during his third day of open hours, not with a complaint, but to express gratitude for the changes she had observed. The atmosphere in our department has improved dramatically, she told Marcus. People seem more relaxed and confident. Even Mrs. Henderson, who supervises the housekeeping staff, has become more approachable. Change often creates positive momentum, Marcus observed. When people see that inappropriate behavior has consequences, it encourages everyone to treat each other better. I wanted you to know that several of us have been discussing your example, Emma continued. The way you stood up for principle even when it could have cost you everything. It's inspired us to speak up when we see problems rather than just accepting them. Marcus felt a deep satisfaction at hearing this. Individual acts of courage could indeed inspire others to find their own strength. However, not all responses to his new position were positive. Marcus discovered that Harold Cunningham had been quietly discouraging staff members from bringing complaints to the staff welfare advocate, suggesting that doing so would mark them as troublemakers and harm their career prospects. This interference with his investigative role required immediate action. Marcus documented Cunningham's behavior and recommended his suspension pending a formal disciplinary hearing. The recommendation went through Sir Geoffrey to Lord Pembroke and was approved within 24 hours. The swift action sent a clear message throughout the palace. Attempts to intimidate or retaliate against staff members who sought help would not be tolerated, regardless of the perpetrator's seniority or connections. Marcus's third week brought a breakthrough in palace culture that exceeded his most optimistic expectations. Lady Catherine approached him with news that staff turnover had virtually stopped since his appointment began. We haven't received a single resignation request since you started in your new role, she reported. More significantly, 2 employees who had submitted resignations have withdrawn them and decided to stay. That's encouraging news, Marcus replied. It suggests that staff confidence in fair treatment is beginning to return. There's more, Lady Catherine continued. I've been tracking productivity and morale metrics across different departments. Both have improved measurably since the training program began and your position was established. The data confirmed what Marcus had hoped. Treating employees with dignity and respect didn't undermine productivity or discipline. Instead, it created a more positive work environment that actually enhanced performance. During his 4th week, Marcus received an invitation that marked a significant milestone in his new role. King Charles requested a private meeting to discuss the early results of the Staff Welfare Advocate Program. The meeting took place in the King's private study, a room Marcus had never entered during his decades of palace service. King Charles received him with warmth and genuine interest in his work. Chief Inspector Thompson, I've been following your progress with considerable interest. Lord Pembroke speaks very highly of your approach and the early results you've achieved. Thank you, Your Majesty. The staff has responded positively to having someone they can approach with workplace concerns. King Charles leaned forward slightly. I want you to know that this program has my complete support. The monarchy must represent the highest standards of conduct, and that includes how we treat those who serve our household. I appreciate your backing, Your Majesty. It makes the job much easier when staff know the commitment to fair treatment comes from the very top. Tell me about the challenges you've encountered, the king requested. Marcus chose his words carefully. Some longtime employees have struggled to adapt to new expectations about appropriate management behavior. There's also been some resistance from those who view workplace protections as undermining traditional authority structures. King Charles nodded knowingly. Change is never easy, particularly in an institution as steeped in tradition as ours. But tradition must serve human dignity, not override it. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with the king asking detailed questions about specific improvements and ongoing challenges. His engagement with the program's details convinced Marcus that royal support was genuine rather than superficial. As Marcus prepared to leave, King Charles made a statement that would guide his work for months to come. Chief Inspector Thompson, your role represents something more than workplace management. It demonstrates that the monarchy can evolve and improve while maintaining its essential character. Continue to pursue that balance with my full authority behind you. Walking back to his office, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his circumstances had changed in just 1 month. From a confrontation that had threatened his career, he had emerged with greater authority and responsibility than he had ever imagined possible. The transformation wasn't just personal, but institutional. Windsor Castle was becoming a place where employees felt valued and protected, where problems could be addressed through proper channels, and where authority was exercised with responsibility rather than arbitrary power. Emma Clark passed him in the corridor, offering a cheerful greeting that reminded him why the struggle had been worthwhile. Her confidence and enthusiasm had returned, and she seemed to embody the positive changes spreading throughout the palace. That evening, Marcus called his daughter to share news of his meeting with the king. Dad, you've gone from nearly getting fired to having direct access to the monarch, Sarah observed with amazement. It shows what can happen when you stick to your principles, even when the cost seems too high. The cost turned out to be much lower than I expected, Marcus replied. Sometimes taking a stand reveals support you didn't know existed. As he prepared for his 5th week in the new role, Marcus felt cautiously optimistic about the future. The palace culture was changing, staff confidence was growing, and institutional backing for reform appeared solid. However, he also understood that lasting change required sustained effort and vigilance. Queen Camilla's hostility hadn't disappeared, and other resistance to reform continued beneath the surface. His success in the role would ultimately be measured not by initial enthusiasm, but by his ability to maintain progress when inevitable challenges arose. The ancient stones of Windsor Castle were witnessing a quiet revolution in human relations. One conversation, one investigation, one act of courage at a time. 6 months into his tenure as staff welfare advocate, Marcus Thompson had transformed not only his own career, but the very culture of Windsor Castle. The changes were evident in countless small interactions throughout each day. Staff members walking with straighter shoulders, supervisors speaking more respectfully to subordinates, and an atmosphere of mutual respect replacing the previous climate of fear and intimidation. The success of the program had attracted attention from other royal residences, with Buckingham Palace, Holyrood House, and Sandringham requesting similar initiatives. Marcus found himself traveling regularly to consult on workplace culture improvements across the entire royal estate, spreading the reforms that had begun with a single act of defiance. On a crisp morning in April, Marcus received news that would mark the culmination of his transformation from guard to advocate. Sir Geoffrey summoned him to discuss an unprecedented opportunity. Marcus, I've just concluded a meeting with Lord Pembroke and representatives from the Cabinet Office, Sir Geoffrey began. Your success with the Staff Welfare Advocate program has attracted attention at the highest levels of government. Marcus settled into his chair, curious about where this conversation was heading. The Prime Minister's office has inquired about adapting our workplace culture reforms for use throughout the civil service, Sir Geoffrey continued. They're particularly interested in your approach to balancing authority with respect for human dignity. That's flattering, but my expertise is specific to the royal household environment. Actually, Dr. Whitfield disagrees. She's prepared a comprehensive analysis showing how our principles could be applied across various government departments. The question is whether you'd be interested in leading such an expansion. Marcus was stunned by the scope of the opportunity. What would that involve? A new position as Director of Workplace Culture for the entire civil service, with authority to implement reforms across all government departments. It would mean leaving the royal household, but expanding your impact exponentially. The offer represented everything Marcus had worked toward, but also meant abandoning the institution that had shaped his entire adult life. The decision would require careful consideration of both personal goals and loyalty to the progress already achieved. Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang with an internal palace extension. Emma Clark's voice carried obvious distress. "Chief Inspector Thompson, could you please come to the state dining room immediately? There's been an incident." Marcus excused himself from the meeting and hurried to the dining room, where he found Emma standing beside an elaborate floral arrangement that had been deliberately destroyed. Flower petals and broken stems scattered across the polished floor told a story of deliberate vandalism. "What happened here?" Marcus asked. Emma's voice shook slightly as she explained. "I finished the arrangements for tonight's state dinner an hour ago. They were perfect. I checked every detail 3 times. When I returned to do final preparations, I found them like this." Marcus examined the damage carefully. The destruction was too systematic to be accidental and too thorough to be the result of a simple mishap. "Did anyone else have access to this room since you finished the arrangements?" "Only senior staff with stateroom keys," Emma replied. "But I don't understand why anyone would do this deliberately." Marcus had a growing suspicion about the perpetrator's identity, but he needed evidence rather than assumptions. "Emma, I want you to prepare replacement arrangements immediately. Don't worry about tonight's dinner. We'll ensure everything is perfect." After Emma left to gather fresh flowers, Marcus began his investigation. He reviewed security footage from the corridor outside the dining room and interviewed staff members who had worked in the area that morning. The evidence quickly pointed to Harold Cunningham, the butler Marcus had disciplined months earlier. Despite his suspension and subsequent retraining, Cunningham had apparently not abandoned his resentment towards staff members who had complained about his behavior. Security cameras showed Cunningham entering the dining room shortly after Emma finished her arrangements and leaving 20 minutes later with no legitimate reason for being there. When confronted, Cunningham initially denied involvement, but eventually admitted to destroying the flowers. "That girl has been protected and coddled long enough," he said bitterly. "She needs to understand that her complaints have consequences." Marcus felt a familiar anger rising at this deliberate attempt to intimidate Emma, but he channeled it into professional determination to ensure Cunningham faced appropriate consequences. "Mr. Cunningham, you've just admitted to destroying palace property and attempting to sabotage official state functions. This goes far beyond workplace misconduct into potential criminal behavior." Cunningham's face paled as he realized the seriousness of his actions. "I was just trying to teach her a lesson about proper respect. You were attempting to punish an employee for exercising her right to report inappropriate treatment. That's retaliation, and it's grounds for immediate dismissal." Marcus spent the rest of the morning documenting Cunningham's actions and preparing termination paperwork. The case was clear-cut, but he wanted to ensure every procedural requirement was met to prevent any appeal or challenge. By afternoon, Harold Cunningham had been escorted from palace grounds with his employment terminated for cause. Word of his dismissal spread quickly among staff, sending a clear message that retaliation against employees who reported problems would not be tolerated under any circumstances. Emma's relief when she learned of Cunningham's termination was evident, but mixed with continued anxiety about future retaliation attempts. "Chief Inspector Thompson, what if other people try to punish me for reporting problems? I can't spend my career looking over my shoulder." Marcus understood her concern. Individual acts of retaliation could be addressed, but the fear of future incidents might undermine staff confidence in the entire